Hello and welcome back to another video about well-ordered language, book 3A. Today we're going to cover chapter 7 and 8, which are the last two chapters in the 3A book. And we're really just looking at compound and complex sentences, which are elements of those two chapters. Before we begin, we need to talk about some basic definitions. First of all, we're talking about clauses in this chapter. A clause is a group of words containing a subject and a predicate. They can either stand by themselves, like the cat sat, or they can be subordinate, which we will talk about in this later in the video. Also, we need to talk about coordinating conjunctions. Coordinating conjunctions are any of the fanboys, for and nor, but, or, yet, and so, that join together two equal elements in a sentence. I can join two subjects together, Peggy and Midge, or I can join two clauses together, two equal clauses, into a compound sentence. What is a compound sentence? A compound sentence is when two independent clauses or principal clauses are joined together into one sentence. When they are independent, they stand all by themselves. So I have a few examples here. The cat sat and the cat slept. These are two separate independent sentences that I've fused together with that coordinating conjunction. The baseball player threw the ball, but the catcher missed it. This is, again, two sentences joined together with a coordinating conjunction, but. Lastly, the craft requires scissors, yet we had none. Again, two independent clauses or principal clauses joined together by a coordinating conjunction. Notice that the conjunction always has a comma before it. This is a hint that the sentence is compound. If you see comma conjunction, you're dealing probably with a compound sentence. When we analyze compound sentences, very little changes. The major change is that we put angle brackets around the coordinating conjunction. So looking at the sentence, Peggy used red paper and Susan used green paper. Looking at the sentence, Peggy is the subject. Peggy used, which is the verb, predicate verb, so we mark PV. What did she use? Well, she used paper, which is our direct object. So we circle it and we write a DO. What kind of paper? Red paper. I have a comma conjunction. So that means I'm going to have a secondary sentence with its own principal elements, including a subject and a verb. So we have Susan. Susan used. Once again, what did she use? Paper, direct object, what kind of paper, an adjective. We've put angle brackets around that coordinating conjunction. Diagramming compound sentence is very straightforward. Our subjects always, as always, go in this first box. What did the subject do? Well, the subject used. What did the subject use? Paper. So, as always, very straightforward. The thing that changes is when I add a second sentence. It's one sentence, but fused together with that coordinating conjunction. So we like to draw these little stair steps. My students like to call this like an apartment building. We have apartment 1 and apartment 2. We draw some dotted lines down from the verb, and it connects to the verb to verb. Do not forget to put the comma on the line here. Peggy used paper and Susan used paper. A complex sentence is a little bit different in that I am joining together a principal clause with a subordinate clause. A subordinate clause cannot stand by itself as a sentence. It is dependent. There are many types of subordinate clauses, but chapter 8 focuses on relative clauses. A relative clause acts like an adjective, and it modifies a noun in the principal clause. They always begin with a relative pronoun who, whose, whom, which, and that. So here are some examples of what I'm talking about. The first sentence, the girl who loved dance practiced her routine every day. The relative clause is who loved dance, and it tells me something about the principal subject, which is the girl. The second sentence, the boys went to the park, which was usually busy with people. which was usually busy with people, is that relative clause, and it modifies park. In this sentence, park is the object of the preposition. Last sentence, the monkey, whom the children loved, played excitedly. Whom the children loved, in these commas over here, is the relative clause modifying the subject monkey. The relative pronoun always refers to an antecedent. So girl, park, and monkey are all antecedents in the above sentences. When we analyze complex sentences, we have our subject, our clause in brackets, and the rest of the sentence. And it can vary how it is arranged. Let's take a look. So the principal elements are the girl practiced. What did she practice? Routine. When did she practice them? Well, she practiced them every day. My subordinate clause is in brackets in red, and there is always in every clause a subject and a verb. So in this sentence, who is the subject? Loved is the predicate verb. She loved what? She loved dance. So direct object, dance. Notice that I am not underlining my subjects and verbs or circling my direct object here. All I am doing is marking them underneath the sentence or in the clause because they are not the principal element. The principal elements remain in the principal clause or the main clause. So the main subject of the sentence and the main verb get those special underlines, but not within the clause. When I diagram complex sentences, we start with what we know. We start with the principal clause. Girl, what does she do? Practice. What does she practice? Routine. When did she practice it? Well, she practiced every day. Whose routine or her routine? Which girl? The girl. And that's very straightforward. We've done this for quite a while. Now we have to figure out what our relative clause is modifying. We know that who loved dance points to girl, the antecedent. So when we diagram, we draw dotted lines down from the antecedent to the relative pronoun. In this case, the relative pronoun is acting as the subject. What is the who? Well, where's the verb? Loved. What did she love? Dance. So we just take our relative clause and our main clause and we draw a dotted line between the two. The trick with these is knowing where to draw the dotted line. In this sentence, whom the children loved is the relative clause. Whom, however, is in the objective case. It is the direct object. The children loved whom? Subject, verb, direct object. So when I draw my dotted line, this time, whom, the direct object slot, points to the antecedent. And so we shift over that diagram. So our last sentence is the boys went to the park, which is usually busy. Our relative clause starts with that relative pronoun, which is usually busy. So let's go ahead and before we get into it and identify the subject and verb of the relative clause, which is usually busy. If it's a struggle for you to find out which one is the subject, start with the verb. Is a linking verb. If it's a linking verb, it probably goes to a predicate adjective or a predicate nominative. Busy is that predicate adjective. How busy? Usually busy. So we have verb, predicate adjective, which only leaves which as the subject. So the principal clause is the boys went to the park. And you know that's the principal clause because it stands all by itself. So when I diagram, boys goes in the first box, went goes in the second box, and then I go ahead and I put my prepositional phrase to the park underneath went. To goes on the preposition line, park goes on that horizontal line, and the is a modifier. Which is usually busy, modifies that word right next to it, and that's consistent. It always modifies the word right next to it. So underneath the object of the preposition park, I'm going to draw a dotted line to my subject, which linking verb is, predicate adjective busy. How busy? Usually busy. And that wraps up the concepts of complex and compound sentences. There are more specific examples in the Well-Ordered Language book, which I encourage you to look at. Thank you.